guys, I was going to talk to you today about FastPass Plus and how to make reservations for it at Walt Disney World. This is actually one of the most requested videos that we've had for us to do. And if you're wondering why I'm missing my better half, Brian opted out of this one because I'm the only person in this family who makes our FastPass Plus reservations. So he said he basically would just be sitting here smiling at the camera without anything to add. So I was going to talk about this, basically talking about it from the perspective of you're totally new to Walt Disney World and totally new to FastPasses and how to make them. And also I want to mention that all of this information is current as of today. So always check the Disney website and make sure that none of the items I mentioned has changed since the time of this recording. So first of all, I want to talk about the time. Well, let me back up actually and talk about what is a FastPass period. So if you're going to Walt Disney World for the first time and you've never been, they have something called the FastPass system, and they now call it the FastPass Plus system. And what that is it's a system that allows you to wait less in line for an attraction. And this doesn't mean you go straight to the front of the line or that you have no wait. It just drastically lessens your time. It's basically a separate queue if you have this FastPass reservation. And the time you're going to wait is going to vary. It varies depending on the time of the year. It varies depending on crowd levels. But typically you're going to wait somewhere around 15 to 30 minutes depending. Please do not sit there and look at your watch. It might take longer than that if the ride breaks down or something unexpected happens, but that's about standard. And so it can really save you a ton of time. But because that's what it does for you, you definitely want to save it for when you can for the rides that have longer waits. And so I'll talk about that, and I'll talk about the tier system in a minute. But first of all, I want to talk about when should you make your FastPass reservations. First of all, the window in time opens up on whatever day you can make your FastPass reservations at 7 a.m. And so before the date that you can start making your reservations, you want to make sure you have a My Disney Experience account and that you can log into that account, that you can see everyone that's going on your trip. So your family members, if you're going with friends, that you're all linked together. That's a whole nother discussion, the My Disney Experience, but just make sure that you can see everyone in your party. And so what date can you make them depends on a few factors. The first window I'll talk about is the 60-day window, and that is if you are staying at a Walt Disney World Resort and as of the time of this recording, or select Disney Springs resorts. And that's a very specific list of resorts. So again, check Disney World's website for specific information about that. But generally speaking, the 60-day window is if you're staying on Disney property at a Disney World resort. There's other non-Disney owned resorts that fall into that as well. And so that's why I mentioned that. So the next window is a 30-day window. So if you're staying off Disney property and not at one of those resorts that's included in that 60-day window, you will be able to make your reservations at 30 days. And this also applies to locals and also to annual pass holders that are not staying on site. And so basically at your first opportunity at that 7 a.m. on the first day you can make your reservations. I highly recommend getting online and trying to book your reservations as quickly as possible because the really desirable attractions will go quickly. The other recommendation I have, and this is a tip, is to go to the end of your trip and book backwards. So sit down ahead of time and map out exactly what parks you want to go to on which day. And if you have a park hopper and you're going to go to multiple parks in one day, decide at what time you'll be at which park and at which park you want to make your FastPass reservations for. And so start with the last day of your trip and work your way backwards. The reason being is when your window opens up for your trip, you'll be able to book from both the first day of your trip, which is at the 60 days, but you'll also be able to book the rest of your trip up to 14 days. There is a 14-day limit. And so at the end of your trip, there will be more rides available because not everyone will be staying as long as you are. For example, some people will only be staying 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, and say you're staying 7 days. If you go to that 7th day, there will be less competition for the really hard to get rides. So if you're going to a park that, say, has a brand new ride that's really popular, you might want to plan that for your last day. I know that sounds counterintuitive. You want to go your first day. You could do both, but you definitely want to try to get that hard-to-get attraction that might have a multi-hour wait and go to your last day to do that. And so one of the things that I wanted to mention about that also is that ticket media needs to be associated with your MDE account before you can make these reservations. So what I'm saying is, if you haven't bought your park tickets yet and linked them to your MDE account, even if you have a resort reservation, you will still won't be able to make your FastPass reservations. So you need to make sure you've already bought your ticket media, whether it's a package with your resort, whether it's an annual pass, it doesn't matter. Whatever your ticket media is, you need to already have that and have it linked to your My Disney Experience account or your MDE account so that you can make your FastPass reservations. So what you can do is make 3 FastPass reservations per day of your trip, and that includes your arrival day and your departure day. So those are included as days of your trip. And once you have and they all have to be at the same park. And once you have utilized those 3 FastPass reservations, you can then add more. So once you're at the park, you want to make sure you have the My Disney Experience app on your phone. And if you do not have a smartphone, you can also use kiosks within the park at designated locations. Those will be on your park map. And you can make additional, and I highly recommend utilizing this. And so that's going to go to my next tip. People will debate this and people will disagree, but our personal preference is to book all of our fast passes as early as possible in the day. The reason people will disagree with that is at rope drop there's fewer people, meaning first thing in the day there's fewer people in the park, so the rides aren't as crowded typically, not always, but typically. The peak time of the day is going to be in the middle of the day. That's going to be the peak time of the day. However, if you get your fast passes at the very beginning of the day, it doesn't stop you from riding other rides. You just have to manage your fast passes. So let's say you book your fast passes at 9, 10, and 11. Park opening at 9. Well, when you get to the park, you don't want to run to your fast pass. You would rope drop something else that you want to ride and go ride that, and then see what time it is. So let's say that you go to Magic Kingdom. Let's say you have a fast pass at 9 for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which is very popular. Well, you could rope drop something else popular. Let's say you go to Peter Pan. You might wait 15 minutes. The ride only takes a couple of minutes. Then you're already out, and you still have plenty of time before your fast pass window expires, because you've got a whole hour to use it. So you have from 9 to 10 to show up for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So I highly recommend getting as many rides in as you can before you go to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, but just make sure you're to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train before 10. There is a 15-minute grace period after that. However, I've also heard if it's super crowded, sometimes they don't honor that grace period. So do not depend on that. Definitely get to the attraction within that 1 hour time frame. So from 9 to 10, make sure by 10 you're at Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and that what you do is you take your Magic Band or your ticket media and you scan that against one of those Mickey scanners as you go into the Fast Pass lane. And that's how you utilize your Fast Pass. And so what's nice is if you wait till close to 10 to ride Seven Dwarfs in this hypothetical scenario, is at 10 your next Fast Pass is up, so you can immediately go to it, use it, and then go on to other attractions. Or you could wait till close to 11 to use it. It's totally your discretion. But once you hit 11, you can immediately go to that third attraction. Go ahead and scan in at the touch point at the beginning of the Fast Pass lane, and then you can already start booking on your phone while you're waiting for your fourth Fast Pass. And if you're going to a different park and you're park hopping, you can also book that fourth Fast Pass at the park that you're hopping to. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Your first 3 have to be at the same park, but after that, you can book at a different park. And after your first 3, you can only book 1 at a time. So you need to use that fourth Fast Pass before you can book a 5th, and so on. But you can keep booking one after the other once you utilize each one. There are 3 ways you can book the Fast Passes from a what can I use to book them. You can use your computer, a web browser on your computer, and go to the Walt Disney World website and log into My Disney Experience. or you can use the My Disney Experience app on your smartphone, or like I mentioned, you can use the kiosks in the park. But if you're planning a trip in advance, you don't want to wait and do it at the park at the kiosks. You definitely want to do it ahead of time on your computer or on the phone app. I personally find the computer browser method the most efficient for booking an entire trip. So if you have 7 days worth of FastPasses to book. If you only have 1 or 2 days, I think the smartphone option is fine. And once you're in the park, I do find the My Disney Experience app on the phone much easier than the kiosk. Plus, if you go to a kiosk, you might have to wait in a line. Not usually you don't, but you might have to. So I highly recommend making sure you have that on your smartphone. Also, did want to mention there is a tier system. I'm not going to describe exactly at this point in time what is in each tier and which parks have tiers, because that changes all the time. As Disney adds new attractions, they change the tier system. Basically, if an attraction is in tier 1, that's the most desirable attraction, and they will only let you pick one from tier 1. Not all 4 parks have tiers as of the time of this recording, but if it is a park that does have a tier, you can only choose one attraction from tier 1, and then you can choose your other attractions from tier 2. And so what I recommend you doing is, well before the window opens for you to book your Fast Passes, go ahead and familiarize yourself with the tiers and look at which attractions you want, and always pick second and third choices, because you may not get exactly what you want. And that goes to my next point. I wanted to mention that as well. If you don't get what you want at first, do not give up. People cancel, move, change their Fast Passes all the time, even the day of. I've been able to snag really desirable Fast Passes on the actual day of the trip. I don't recommend waiting to do that, but I'm just saying if you weren't able to get what you want, don't give up. Or if you weren't able to get the time you want, don't give up. Because I've been also able, let's say I couldn't get the 9, 10, 11 like I mentioned, and I had to get them later in the day, I've been able to keep checking and keep inching them back. And so I do recommend to keep checking. Don't give up if you don't get exactly what you want, because it can be very competitive and you don't always get it right in the beginning, but later you may get a much better option for you. I also wanted to do a small caveat for annual pass holders. If you're local, you already know all this, I'm sure. But if you're not local and you decide to buy an annual pass, because we're pass holders and we do not live locally, we're out of state, you can get 7 days worth of Fast Passes, and you can book those 30 days in advance. And if you're staying on Disney property, that changes to be pretty much like you are not an annual pass holder, meaning you can book it at the 60-day mark. And if you're staying, you can book up to the 14-day limit that I mentioned, just like any other person. So I wanted to mention that because that's a little bit of an unusual situation if you're an out-of-state annual pass holder. That surprised me because one time we went on a really long trip. I think it was maybe the 14 days. And we stayed off-site part of the trip and on-site part of the trip. And since I already had 7 days on-site, I couldn't book Fast Passes for the off-site part without messing up my on-site, since we had annual passes. So it's just something to keep in mind. Dining reservations. So the one thing I wanted to mention, you have to make your dining reservation. Well, no, you don't have to. You should make your dining reservations at 180 days. That's the time period from the beginning of when you have your trip reserved. So if you're staying on site on Disney property, at 180 days, you can start making your dining reservations for your trip. And so that requires you to think about which park you want to be at 6 months in advance. And then when you get to your window at either 60 or 30 days to make your FastPass reservations, you have to keep in mind your dining reservations. Now, My Disney Experience will warn you and say, hey, you've got a dining reservation at this time, and remind you of the time. But it's better to have a plan before you even go to make your reservations, and make sure you're not stepping on the dining reservations you've made. And also make sure you're booking FastPasses at the park where your dining reservation is if it's near the same time frame. So this is not exhaustive of everything that I could talk about with FastPass Plus. It's really a complex topic. It truly is. Disney World has several articles and frequently asked questions about it. Other blogs and websites have tons of information. I highly, highly recommend doing your own research and looking into it. And like I said, these things change all the time too, but I really hope this has been helpful. It's not an easy thing, and it's not like any other park out there. It's something totally unique to Walt Disney World. So I hope this is helping you with your trip planning. As always, we appreciate subscribes, likes, shares, and comments. Until our next adventure.